Welcome to the Resonate podcast with Aideen. I'm Aideen Riada, and my guest today is Amy Lanci. Amy is a communication consultant, speaker, and founder of Untold Story Enterprises. She specializes in helping organizations with internal communication, teamwork, and leadership. She also guides her clients in crafting their stories to connect with audiences and establish authority. Amy is the author of 2 books, Listen Up and the Email Communication Bible. And I have to say to everyone as well that Amy and I are friends. She's been a client of mine for a few years as well, and I'm so excited to have her on the show today. Thanks for joining us,
Hey.
Amy.
Thank you for having me here.
So, you have been part of my journey since I moved to the US. You're one of my first online clients, all the way over in San Diego, and me being in
Yes.
Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been an absolute pleasure working with you. And your business has kind of evolved a lot. And I'm just wondering about, you know, what your journey over the last few years has been like. Because I know that
Mm.
finding your voice was a very big part of your journey. That it hasn't been all plain sailing, right?
Oh gosh, no, it's not been plain sailing at all. I mean, it's not been, not been the highest of tides and the greatest of storms, but it definitely has gotten stormy sometimes. So when I think back to when I first met you, and you mentioned that you were, a vocal coach, and and unbeknownst to you, and unbeknownst to the person that introduced us, I had been thinking for very strongly to get singing lessons because singing was always very important to me. But it was always the I'm going to sing in the shower kind of thing, and and then when I met you, I just, I think we were treating it as if it was a normal networking call. And then right at the very end, I said, hey, how much, if, let's just say I wanted to do some vocal lessons, how much would you charge? And you told me what your rate was. And I knew automatically that that was well within my budget. So I said, let's do it. Let's do it. And then I just remember you were like, okay, let's do it. And so, but I just remember, what started off as what I thought was vocal lessons. I realized that, if there was something stressful that happened that day, uh, and it was on my mind, but I was trying to put on my game face of like, all right, let's just do this singing lesson. I could tell that you could tell that there was something going on, and that you would ask me questions to to earn my trust, and to give me that space to talk about what was really going on. And what was interesting was that I noticed that as soon as I did that, my voice was less strained. It was easier to reach the notes. I was clearer. Like I could just tell automatically that what I thought was quote unquote allergies or stress was actually just blockage of blocks on my voice. And so I just remember wanting more of that, because I knew that that was really important. And I already knew that there are emotions that could get trapped in our bodies, but I could tell that by working with you, I could see that practical end result of like, okay, if I talk about what's really going on, then my voice clears up. I can speak better. And that really made an impact on the way I see my value, the way that um, the way that I, s- the way that I presented myself, and the way that I set boundaries, or even just the way that I looked at my particular role in different situations with clients. Yeah, it really, working with you really helped me to better understand where I can draw the line in terms of like what is fair for me, and also in what ways is a situation or myself blocking my voice.
Yeah, that it's so interesting because I think since I started working with people around singing, I've always been really conscious that whatever's going on inside us is having a very strong impact on what's we feel capable of doing, how much we will say about certain things, and how we communicate. And it just seemed to develop from there that I just had this awareness about what was going on with people. I somehow would tune into them, and I'd know that it wasn't like just a vocal, exercise
Mhm.
solution. It was
Mhm.
a let's, work on what's really going on for you today. How are you today? Let's
Mhm.
let's have that conversation first. I think a lot of us do jump into our day without asking that question.
Mhm.
We're like, okay,
Oh
I've
yeah.
got like that. I'll put my game face on. I will get started up with my work. I'll do my job. And and I'm guilty of this as well. It's only a few days later you go, hang on a second, I haven't been that happy the last few days. I must be
Mhm.
something a little bit off. And then I'll realize, oh yeah, I have been stressed since Tuesday because I've been wanting to do this, and I can't do both at the same time, whatever it was. And that ability to see it in others hasn't cured it in me. Like I still I still have these moments myself, and thankfully my husband is the one who tries to keep an eye on me. But
Yeah.
he's good, but I'm resilient, and I can take a lot, I can put up
Yeah.
with a lot. And
Mhm.
then if I don't ask myself, how am I today, that's going to be a
Mhm.
problem. That's where we all need to imagine that it's okay to be who you are and how you are right now.
Yeah. Yep.
Because we tend
Yep.
to push those things away, like you said.
It's like, oh, I'm gonna jump in and then do whatever I need to do, when really the root cause of stress, or just the perception of how a situation is, actually needs to be addressed first, and then action can be taken. And I was so into action mode, that it's like, oh wait, how is Amy actually doing? And then when you're talking, Aideen, I was thinking about how, I when I help my clients when they're in, they are seeking my advice, or telling me like, how do I word it to this person in this situation, you know I do provide that space where they are able to tell me how they really are. But I have a feeling with, same with you and Aideen, that it's like, well, the person like me and you, like we are the people who are asking other people how they're doing, but then making sure that we're asking ourselves, or we have other people who are asking us, how are we doing? What's going on?
What's going
um,
on?
what's
Yes.
going on?
Yeah, I
And
agree. I think because you work as a communications consultant, your whole thing is about helping people to express themselves, right? So it's not like
yes.
through singing. Well, it's not through like I do more than just singing, as you know as well, Amy.
Oh
But
yeah.
with you, it's often written words that they're
Yes.
trying to connect those written words to the truth,
Mm-hmm.
in a way that helps them connect. So
Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
when you've got other things on your mind, like you're thinking, well, I just want my written words to sell something, or I just want my written words to tell this part of my story.
Mm-hmm.
So people must often come to you with their project and have lots of ideas, but that's probably not, you're not going to
Yeah.
just go, okay, I'm on board, I'll just do it your way. What is the process that you use to make space for someone to go a little deeper, basically?
Mm. Got it. Usually, if they are very strategy and goal oriented, usually I have to go back to, well, why are we doing this in the first place? And sometimes I will get the rehearsed answer. Like, well, because we want to get more leads, or because well, that's more for marketing standpoint, but for
Mm.
internal communication, it's more like, because we want to be more productive. And it's like, okay, well, what has caused the lack of productivity before? And I find that when I ask that question outright, I have to gauge where the client is. I have to search my intuition and say, okay, like, are they in a defensive spot, or are they very open right now? And so if they're very open, being direct is great. If they're not in that open spot, then it's about peeling back the layers with different questions. Because I know that, if there's a sore spot, or if there's something at the root that they've been trying to get at, but they don't know what that is, the moment I ask a question and I give space for that, it's going to get to that root answer. It's like, oh, because we have been arguing so much lately, and it's people are starting to see that, or we feel like where our department is alone and everyone else is looking badly upon us. Like, that's a different story than, hey, let's just like do this thing and get in there. And so,
Yes.
yeah, it starts by peeling back the layer with the right questions, with curiosity, using intuition to kind of gauge where people are. And then it's about, okay, so what is it that you really are trying to say? And what would you like to happen? So just kind of like, it's kind of like what I was saying with my sessions with you, that we have to dive deeper first before we figure out how to move forward.
And I love how that you actually can outline those points so
Hmm.
clearly because
Thank you.
that's something that because I work very intuitively, I can't always say that there's a process that I'm taking people through. But it sounds to me like
Mm.
you have something, you're very clearly articulating how your brain works while working with people. And I am not sure that I could articulate it quite the same. But the
Thank you.
interesting thing is that we are all hiding from the things that are hard.
Yes, yes, uh-huh, oh yeah, because something in us is saying, we don't need to deal with that right now, or this is irrelevant to the situation, I can deal with that later. Or I think the even deeper question is, do we feel worthy of dealing with that hurt? So and it all depends on the person and the situation. But saying what's hurting and what's hard is the first step, and that's very challenging for a lot of people. And what do you need to do that? What do you need for that? You need your voice. So it goes back to communication, and it goes back to, what is stopping you from saying something out loud.
Yeah. And I just love your ability to create a safe space for that too.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, you do the same thing. You do the same thing for me. It's like, and I mean, I come into our sessions now, and I'm just like ready to tell you like what's been going on, and like you don't even have to dig anymore. I'm just like, she's gonna figure out something's up anyway, so why hide it? So
Absolutely.
yeah. Hmm.
So, look, I have been with you through the journey. I've been on the
Yes.
sidelines for two books that you've written over the
Oh
last two
gosh.
years,
Hmm.
and I know you're writing your kids' books now too.
Hmm.
Tell us a
Yes.
little bit
Yeah.
about your journey as an author, because I mean,
Hmm.
going from like all the different things you've done, but you haven't really talked about all the different things you've done. Maybe you should tell us a little bit about that first, because it might make more sense then to speak about you as an author.
Right. Going back in time, I was a sea turtle lab technician. So, in other words, I worked in the lab for 14 years, and I would process turtle skin, blood, all kinds of different sea turtle tissue samples in order to extract DNA and to generate that data within a science institution. And I did that for 14 years. And on top of that, I did field work with different sea turtles. So before I get lost in the sea turtle world, because I know that sea turtles are very charismatic, and lots of people only want to know about the sea turtle part. I just want to say that, that I was in that world. And it was very interesting to see, how scientists operate, what needs to happen for a scientific journal to accept a study, and and it's to see like the whole scientific method happening over and over again. And then part of the way through, that career, I met the man who is now my husband, Michael, and at the same time, I found out I had some health issues that really needed to be addressed. I was only 24, and so I went through this whole uh, personal development health journey. And so while I did get my health back on track, I found myself in such a way where I was looking at my current career as a scientist, as a science lab technician, technically, and it didn't match. It didn't match what I had just gone through. It didn't match me at the core. And so I went into business for myself first as a health coach, made no money from that, and then I went to copywriting, which is basically writing for marketing and branding strategy and purposes. And I got started getting clients that way. Um, and that was really interesting because writing was always important to me because I was a speech delay child and I did not speak for a long time, but writing was my thing. Writing was a really great way for me to be heard. And so to go back to writing, it was like the universe was like, yeah, go this way, keep going this way, keep following this trail, Amy. So I did copywriting, yeah, for at least the first 3 years of my business, just completely copywriting. And then I realized that as I was helping my clients with their about page copy, I can't tell you how many tears were shed. I can't tell you how many really deep, wonderful moments I witnessed. And, I realized that, the work that I would do with my clients was really, really important on a personal level because it wasn't just, hey, let me write your about page copy. It was about, hey, let me just figure out why this business is so important to you. Why is this audience so why do you want to make such a big impact with this audience? How did you get started? And that can come from a very, very deep place, especially if you're a very heart-centered business owner. And so I went into more consulting in addition to offering copywriting, and then I also did some work with with organizations for their internal communication, like listening to their stakeholders' stories, and in a way just kind of diving into mediatorship, and figuring out that there are a lot of dynamics within an organization, within a department, within among different departments too, and then when you put in the stakeholders in there, it can get kind of crazy. But I realized I had a knack for kind of zooming out and listening to what was happening, and then trying to figure out what was really happening under the surface. So now we get to this point of just I've had a lot of marketing experience, a lot of branding experience, and other experiences with science and organizations and learning team dynamics, and just like it's just been an interesting way for life to spiral back to the core of it, which is, helping people to be heard. Everything I've ever done, whether it's speaking or writing, or even when I did copywriting, or when I do consulting, it's about making sure that my clients are heard. It's about making sure that we hear the story of also the people they're trying to reach, whether it's their team member or their prospective audience. Everything I've ever done is to make sure people are heard, and to make sure that I'm heard too. So that's how that's been my journey really. And that's like when I say I'm a communication consultant, it really is about making sure that I advocate for my clients, by helping them find the words that they've been meaning to find.
Well, one thing that stood out to me in everything you just said was that you listen.
Hmm. Yeah.
And
Hmm.
I'm wondering if your skill of listening
Hmm.
is almost the stronger skill,
Hmm.
even to your ability to put it back into words, back to that person. Because, of course, you mentioned
Yeah.
very briefly there that you were speech delayed. You spent more time
Hmm.
listening than the average kid. I'm sure I
Yeah,
talked
did.
way more than you when I was little because I was not speech delayed by any stretch of the imagination.
Oh.
I was basically being ignored because I was talking so much, probably. But
Yeah.
the key here is the listening part, I feel.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
do you
Mhm.
acknowledge
Yeah.
that skill in yourself?
You know what? I do and then I don't. Like, if I were to be completely honest right now, I feel like the moment you called it out just now, because you just called me out just now in your very loving way. Like, I feel like I use my listening as a secret weapon. And not the kind to hurt people, but the kind that like people are not expecting. But it's like it's the main thing in my toolkit. But I also feel like uh sometimes I feel like my listening is the underdog that nobody really wants to hear about, and that's just my own internal voice saying that. And that's mainly just it's because it's always happening in the background, but
Hmm.
it's not the hero of the story, or it's not the obvious hero of the story. Because when someone is speaking, you hear that it's quite it gets people's attention. But listening, though, listening is the biggest tool, but it's just that it's silent.
It's very silent.
It's silent, so people don't really notice, or maybe they do, but they see. I don't know. It's yeah. So um, I do have issues, or it's a work in progress to acknowledge that within myself.
Well,
And
I'm
luckily,
just
you have
glad you
been
did
helping with me
today.
that. Yeah, thank you. See, this is just a little piece of like I just imagine, how like little snippets like that, but like in 60-minute segments every 2 weeks. Like that's how it is with me and Aideen. It's like, all right, what else does Amy need to own? So
But we all need
I
that.
love it.
It's like we mirror each other, which is
Yeah,
lovely. So, but
yeah.
here's another part, because this is the really nice thing about interviewing someone I know so well, is I
Mm-hmm.
know exactly what I want to ask next.
Yay.
So you've got that listening part, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the thing about the listening, yes, it's silent. Yes, it is unacknowledged and unnoticed and maybe undervalued.
Mm-hmm.
But within that silence, there's a lot going on. And what's going on in that head
Yes.
of yours, Amy? Because I know
Oh gosh.
from knowing you, right,
Mm-hmm.
and your background in science, and the
Mm-hmm.
way that you look at things, the way you investigate things. We talked about that
Mm.
before
Mm-hmm.
previously, that there's something happening in your mind while you're listening, right?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not just blank space. It's happening up there. Yeah, I never had an opportunity to really talk about what's going on in my mind. That's a great question. So whenever and this is for everyone I speak to, and I hope I don't make anyone feel self conscious whenever they come talk to me. But whenever I speak to someone, I first kind of get a read on them, like my first kind of energetic read, like, okay, like, are you open? Is there a wall? I feel that right away. And then as someone is talking, I'm listening. I'm listening to what they're saying, and I'm making sense of what they're saying to me in my mind. Kind of like putting together a puzzle, because I had people tell me point blank what they're talking about, but then there's some people who will ramble, and that's fine. I'll put it together in my head. And then there's some people who they'll tell me a lot of ideas, and I'll compile them in my head, and I'll give them like a one liner saying, are you trying to say this? But what most of all is happening underneath all of that, because there's a lot going on in my head, is I'm listening for any words that pop out at me that someone may say. So, for instance, if let's say Aideen was talking to me and she was saying how, back in Ireland, when I was a kid, I really loved my dog, and my dog was so faithful and loving to me. Like, if she said those words to me, um, I may pick up something on like faithful and loving. Like there might be like something in my body. It feels like a chill. Um, it's almost like a, it's not like a lie detector test, but it's more like what are some words that are so meaningful to somebody that there's something else that's underneath that to just kind of focus on. And so I'll when I hear that, when I feel that, I'll probably point that out, and I point that out in the conversation. I'll say, "There's something about the way you said loving and faithful. Is that something that is really important to you?" And that leads the conversation more. So that's what's going on in my head. I'm like thinking of, I'm piecing together what people are saying, and I am, feeling what words are, just popping out at me. There's some attachment, or just something really sentimental or special about certain words, or even like even when someone's upset, if there's certain words that are pinging to me, I'll be like, there's something about those, this word and this word, that has to do with what's at the root of why you're upset. So that's what's going on in my head.
Very interesting. The diagnosis is you're awesome.
Oh, thank you.
But here's now the next thing that's popping into my mind. The next word that's jumping out and pinging for me is getting
Mhm.
to the root of something. So what you said
Mm,
was that you somehow are able to, through their words, notice what is at the root of their either their values or their
mhm.
pain or their challenge.
Yes.
And
Mhm.
having an insight into that must give you a lot of help, must be very helpful when you're, guiding someone to communicate, because that's the
Yes.
problem is we hide from the things that hurt or the things that are
Mhm.
hard. So
Mhm.
you're
Mhm.
you're somehow finding those things so that you can make sure that's not glossed over or avoided anymore.
Yes. Yes. And then I also have to take a read on the person and be like, is this person going to take my feedback? And so there are times when I have noticed, okay, this person seems like they're not in that stage when they're not ready to hear it. So I also will have to evaluate, hmm, do I have a relationship where I can tell this person this thing yet? No. Okay, I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna put that in my back pocket for now. Or okay, is this person ready to hear this right now? Yes, but only if I say it in a very small increment, so they could take a little nibble, and then I can see if they're willing to take the whole cookie. So sometimes I have to I have to just gauge where people are at too. Well, actually, not sometimes; it's all the time. But yeah, definitely. Like I have been known to not respond if I can tell they're not ready to respond yet.
Hmm. Absolutely. How long is that process for your clients? I mean, if you were, what's your ideal length of time to work with a new client minimum?
So when I work with an organization, so it really depends on what the project is. But if the project is something along the lines of, um, we need to have better communication protocols. We need to teach the employees what the standard of conduct is. We need to figure out what the company voice is. That would take a minimum of 3 to 6 months, because I would need to get a better understanding. What is the company voice? Like what is that? Like, it may seem obvious to some people, but is it obvious to me? Probably not. Not at first, and probably most likely not obvious to everyone in the company. And then once I get a hold of it, it's like, well, how do we best teach that to everyone? And how is this working within the current goals and milestones, and all those big corporate words. But if you think on a smaller scale, with somebody who is saying, hey, I am wanting to uh, I am wanting to better clarify the messaging behind my business, and I need to be able to tell that story. I need to be able to better explain what that means. Then that could be as short as 3 months. So it really depends on the, like, is it a person or an organization, and it depends on the project and the complexity of it.
What's your favorite kind of work to be doing right now?
So right now, let's see, the my favorite type of work is working with people who see themselves as thought leaders. So, in other words, like people who naturally want to speak on stage and people who naturally want to write a book. Like it's that double whammy. Actually, it's a triple whammy because they're also in business for themselves too. They're not just out there to be professional speakers. They are there to be professional speakers. Don't get me wrong, but they have some other vehicle that not only makes them income, but it's their baby, it's their legacy, it's the thing that their life mission is behind. So I love working with those kind of people who feel like they're meant for something big in this world, and they have all these different avenues such as stages, podcasts, books that they really want to feel more confident about, and really want to dive in. They just need some help to figure out what do they actually say, what do they want to say, and how do they want to be perceived. So I love helping those people because they're really savvy, they are really passionate, and they really just they want to make an impact just as much as they want to make an income. So those are the people I really love to help. And I also really love the organizations. If we're talking about the bigger companies, I really love the organizations who also feel very passionate about who they're helping, and they also feel uh, very loving toward their workforce. And what I mean by that is, they advocate for the workforce. They want to treat their employees fairly. They're always trying to figure out how can they do better by them. So those are
Mhm.
the kind of organizations I also really love working with, because they have their hearts and their minds in the right place. Now it's just a matter of figuring out what's missing, and how can I help them with that.
I love it. I love it.
Thank you.
Your
Thank
big
you.
heart and their big heart together equals huge heart.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, one thing that we didn't get back to earlier
Yeah.
was talking about your books.
Yes. Oh yeah, my books. Yes. Let's see. So Listen Up was my very first book. That was published in March of 2023, and I say that knowing full well that the journey to get there was 5 years before, and it's a tiny little book. It's a little, I call it my little power pocket book. But it took 5 years to get there because of just all the different writer's blocks and times I questioned myself. It was just a lot. Plus, I was working full time and had my business at in the very beginning stages. So there was and I was a new mom, so there was a lot going on. So I give myself grace for that. But Listen Up essentially was my way of bringing my experience of having been in science, having been in the spiritual intuitive communities, and also having been in the business communities, bringing the intuition, that creativity, that analytical thinking into the mix when it comes to communication, and essentially breaking it down in such a way where it's easier to understand when you're speaking to someone who is very analytical. What do they need to hear in order to continue the conversation with you? Or when you're speaking to someone who is very creative, like a business owner, how do you speak to them in such a way where you earn their trust and you understand them faster than you might have otherwise? Or when you're speaking with someone who is very intuitive and comes from that place, what are they actually looking for? And the little hint here is they're not looking for fancy words, they're looking for how open you are. So how do you present yourself as someone who is open? So I put together Listen Up as a way of just talking about these different populations, what they're focusing on, and to really drive home the point that all of us, we're all three of them. It's just a matter of, which one are we leaning more heavily into when it comes to communication, and how do we kind of switch our brains from one person who is heavily leaning in one bucket, and then to another person who's more heavily leaning into another bucket. So that's Listen Up. That was my first book baby. And then the second book baby that came out earlier this year, in 2024, the Email Communication Bible. And I wrote and published that in 6 weeks. That was like the opposite of Listen Up, because I was just very clear in my mind that this has got to be a book to help people write better emails at work, and come from the standpoint of being aware of your environment, the people you're talking to, the relationship with someone, and how do you come at that from a very compassionate, empathetic place. So those are my books. Those are my
And that's
books.
not all. There's more coming, right?
Oh gosh, yeah, no, and then I have my children's books, which two have been written. The third one I'm going to be starting to write soon, and the first one is entering the editing and publishing process, and basically these are my very first fictional books that I will be publishing. My daughter is the main character in these books. Essentially, she finds herself at school one day, and then somehow she's magically transported to a magical land called Untold Story Land. And so she goes through this whole journey to, in the first book, she learns what it means to listen to her intuition, and then in the second book, it's all about courage and shadow work for kids. And then the third book that I will be working on will be talking about transformation and evolution, and her way back home. So it's that's to me, these children books, they are my legacy pieces. It's my giant I love you card to my daughter, and it's also just my I love you card to my inner child. What I would have loved to have learned when I was younger, and now know now as an older person. And it's just yeah, it's just really fun to dive into creativity and magic, and then also put little teasers of things that I've learned along the way. So that's I mean, to anyone who's ever wanted to write a book, whether it's nonfiction or fiction, it's an amazing process, and it's long. It can be long, but it can also be very short. But it's also very rewarding in the very end, and also
Mm-hmm.
rewarding along the way too.
Well, I'm excited to read your children's books. I'm really fascinated to find out more about that, and that's a very exciting next phase for you. But it's almost like you're kind of holding different. It's like you're holding kind of slightly different creative projects all at the same time, which is a
Yeah.
challenging thing. It's something that I do
Oh my
myself.
gosh. Mm-hmm.
And I admire that. So we have to
Thank
start
you.
winding up now, but I would really
Yes.
love if there's anything that you particularly want to say to our listeners, um, based on what it is that what do you like? I think it's Oprah that says, what do you know to be true? Or what is it you would
Ah.
like to, inspire people with?
That's a great question. Let me a second. And oh, this just came to me. Um, if there's something that's been on your heart, it needs to be said.
That's deep, Amy.
Thank
Very
you.
deep. I'm not going to say anything else. Let that line resonate. If there's something,
If there's something on your heart, it needs to be said.
beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
to
you.
everybody who's been listening to us today. It's always an honor. I believe people are listening. Sometimes I wonder, but it's true. People do download this podcast and they do listen.
Oh
And
yeah.
I'm really grateful to all the listeners. And we would love to hear how you received this podcast and what you think. And Amy is available. She works for a living. She wants clients. So please keep her in mind and look out for her books. We'll definitely look out for the children's book too. And I look forward to our next episode. Thank you all for being here. Bye bye.